Hi everyone, my name is Jason Fair and I'm here with Andy Borka,
Hello.
and we're going to be talking to you about we're going to be talking to you about Talking Flight Monitor. Talking Flight Monitor is a project that's been going for about 2 years now, almost 2 years, and this is accessibility software that allows a blind or visually impaired person to use mainstream flight simulation software. So we're talking about Microsoft Flight Simulator X, Lockheed Martin Prepared, version 4, version 5, and to some extent Flight Sim 2020. So this video is going to be just a brief introduction, and then future videos will definitely talk about more aspects of the software in detail. So TFM started off as just a sort of a pet project of mine it really was a learn to code project. It was something that I was trying to learn programming, and I needed a project to actually work on. And flight simming has always been something that I've been interested in. I'm totally blind myself, and it's there's always been sort of various ways to get access to sims, but nothing has really been comprehensive. There's been add-ons over the years that have sort of worked for us, but there was never sort of one add-on that tried to do, to be a fully accessible solution for flight simulation. So just to be clear, this is not a simulator. It is an add-on that works with existing mainstream flight simulators. So, when TFM started, it was all it did was read the nearest city to your aircraft, and now, as you will see, it does many, many, many things, and I believe right now there are well over 100 pieces of information that it can read to you. So that's sort of a really brief introduction to what TFM is, and now we're going to just jump right in and show you what it can do.
Yeah, and I guess before we get started, there's a whole lot of things that are to come on top of the over 100 things or more that it can do right now. So,
Desktop list. Andy Borka 1 of 50.
that, we can jump into getting TFM up and running.
Andy Borka.
If you want to add anything. So I'm gonna.
I should mention that oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Talking Flight Monitor is completely free software, so it's free and open source. So for information, you can go to talkingflightmonitor.com or .net, both work, for information about the software.
All right, so
Andy.
let's get
T. This PC 2 of 52. T. Talking Flight Monitor 26 of 52.
TFM up and running. So I'm on my desktop. I want Talking Flight Monitor icon. By the way, it does come with an installer, so you just run the installer, answer the typical install questions, and it will be on your desktop. And here we go.
Zero. Airspeed. Loading airport database. Current aircraft. Freeware. C. TTS 16 AUG 2013 738 CFM 56 7DW2 plus A 7000 plus D00 plus D0 all white B. Airport database loaded.
Alright, never mind the very long aircraft name because it's freeware, so that's what they decided to call it. Whatever aircraft that you do use, that will be listed in that startup sequence. Alright, so now we are actually in the cockpit of a 737, which is a freeware plane, and we're ready to get started.
Before you do that, Andy, I want to just mention just a really quick note about requirements. So, like as I said, this does require the use of Microsoft Flight Simulator or Lockheed Martin Prepared. What you're also going to need, though, is a copy of an add-on called FSUIPC, and that add-on you can just go to fsuipc.com. If you've got FSX, you'll want version 4. If you've got Prepared, you'll probably want version 6. And you don't need to have a registered copy of the add-on. Although, he's done amazing things for us. So, if you can register, I would encourage you to do that. But it's not required for the software.
Alright, so now that we're in our cockpit, our airplane is currently turned off. So the first order of business is to turn the airplane on. So in P3D, to do auto start, I'm just going to press Control E.
Number 1 starter engaged. Number 1 fuel valve open. Number 1 generator active.
Takes a while for the planes to start.
Number 1 ignition on. Number 1 starter off. Number 2 starter engaged. Number 2 fuel valve open. Number 2 generator active. S.
Flip to the outside view before it says something else.
Number 2 ignition on. Number 2 starter off.
Alright, I believe we're started up now. So let's go back to the cockpit. Alright, now we're started up. So TFM had used the screen reader of choice, NVDA in my case, to read the status of the engines as they were starting up for the startup sequence. Now that we're started up and ready to go, we need to find out where we are currently located. So before we do all of that, let's talk about the TFM key. Go ahead if you want to talk a little bit about the TFM key and how hotkeys work.
Yeah, for sure. So there's sort of two TFM keys. We're going to talk about really the keys use a layered key approach. So if you're familiar with, for example, JAWS, how JAWS has a layered key system. So if you do, insert spacebar and then press other keys to do, OCR and various other things. TFM has a similar system. So you'll press either right bracket or left bracket and then another key. So, and there's a lot of them. So,
Yeah.
for example, if you and more coming. So if you press, for example, right bracket and then A, that gives you your altitude, just as an example.
All right.
Right bracket C gives you your nearest city. And there's I'm not going to go through all the keys, but there's
a keyboard manager though where it lists them all.
There is, yep. So you can bring up a keyboard manager. So typically the right bracket keys are used to kind of get information about like your current altitude, your city, airspeed, ground speed, etc., current heading. Left bracket is used more to do things like controlling the autopilot. We're going to talk about that in a bit. The other thing that you'll notice, in addition to all of those keys, is that TFM will read a lot of aspects of the plane automatically. So you don't necessarily have to request things all the time. For example, if when you change your parking brakes or when you change your flaps or your landing gear, that's all going to read, and those are not TFM specific keys. Those are keys that are part of the sim. So as we talk about this, we'll mention, for pressing a key in the sim as opposed to a TFM key, we'll mention what that is as well.
All right, so we want to find out where we currently are. So that hotkey would be right.
Com 1, 100.
Whoops, that's the wrong one. right bracket.
Runway 33
Shift C.
RTYYZ.
See, right bracket does a single beep, and I hit Shift C.
Runway 33 RTYYZ.
Runway 33 right at Toronto. It gives you the airport identifier, so it's not blabbing in your ear forever. Alright, now that we know where we're at, where should we go from here?
Yeah. Why don't we check some of the other status, maybe altitude, speed. Some of that's going to read 0 because we're not moving.
Yeah, it's all going to read 0, but it
we
gives an idea. So altitude. Well, there's two altitudes.
You could do heading.
Yeah, heading. So right bracket and
Heading.
H.
328.
Again.
Heading. 328.
328. Let's try
9 feet ag.
above ground. It says 9 feet above ground. That was with right bracket G. Right bracket A.
578 feet ASL.
It says 570 feet. I think it said 570.
578 feet ASL.
578.
Yeah, that's the above sea level.
Yeah, that's above sea level.
That's the above sea level altitude of Toronto.
Yeah. If you want to know how fast or slow you're climbing, you could do
0 feet per minute.
right bracket V as in Victor. That will tell you your vertical speed. So how far are you climbing? We have two air speeds.
0 knots indicated.
Right bracket S for indicated airspeed.
0 knots true.
And right bracket T for true airspeed. Let's do...
And there is...
Gear down. Dot.
Right bracket Shift E. Yes, our landing gear is down. Yes.
Good thing.
Yes, and
Flaps 0.
right bracket L for flaps to read the status, and it was 0.
Flaps 0. Flaps 0.
Alright, so we have some indicators that we could read, and what do we have next?
Why don't you go ahead? Sorry, why don't you go ahead and extend your flaps, just so people can, to demonstrate that.
Flaps 1.
Alright, flaps 1. Now,
Yep.
in order to
So
do
as
that, I
your
press...
flaps extend. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, so as I did that, it was pressing F7. That's a simulator hotkey.
And we've got keys to read current fuel, how much fuel you're burning. So there's a ton of info that you can get, and this is all info that's visually available, obviously in the cockpit. But as a blind person, you don't typically, you don't have access to that normally. So this is giving you access to all that.
Right. So right bracket F for fuel.
Total fuel. 45,762.0 pounds. 6,831.0 gallons. Total fuel flow. 1215.
Alright, so we have a full tank of gas. How many tanks does this have? So we could do right bracket 1 through however many tanks it has to see how much is in each one.
Center main. 100%. 28,699 pounds. 4284 gallons. Left
Right
main.
bracket
99%.
2.
8527 pounds. 1273 gallons. Right main.
Right bracket
99%.
3.
8526 pounds. 1273 gallons.
And right bracket 4.
Tank not available.
Yep, see, tank not available.
Tank not available.
So we know this 737 has 3 tanks. We can also find out engine throttle status.
Engine 1. 0.0%. 1642 pounds thrust.
That's control 1 through control 4. So there was 1.
Engine 2. 0.0%. 1642 pounds thrust.
There's 2.
Only 2 available.
Oh, yep. TFM says only 2 engines are available. So if something's not available, it's going to tell you it's not available. Okay, so we went through fuel and some of the gauges in the cockpit. engine throttle. What do we have next?
Let's see. Do we want to do? As I said, a lot of the systems in the aircraft will read automatically. So, like period to turn on and off your parking brake will read, all that sort of stuff. Why don't we talk a bit about? Well, actually, before we get to autopilot, we can't really demonstrate this, but I do want to mention it. We do have a couple of different modes for getting indication of. Think of it as your aircraft's position in space. So we call one of them attitude mode, and another one is runway guidance. And what these will do, attitude mode will give you audible indication of your aircraft's pitch and bank. So the bank is the angle of your wings, and as you're turning, and the pitch is your nose angle. So you can get either audible, as in tones, or speech indication of your bank angle, which can be really handy for just playing around with manual flying. Most of the time, when we're flying these aircraft as they do in real life, we're not necessarily manually hand flying them. We're actually flying using the autopilot. So we're going to talk about the autopilot in a minute. The other function is runway guidance, which will, as you're rolling down the runway, will give you a tone in your left or right ear if your heading is deviating off the runway heading. So let's say right now Andy, I think, is on runway 31 or 32.
Let's see.
And
runway 33 R at CYY.
33 right.
Okay, so I think his heading was 328, if I remember, something like that.
Let's check.
So
Heading
if
328.
Yeah, 328.
Yeah, so runway guidance, if you turn that on, it will lock in heading 328, and if you start deviating from that off left or right, you'll get tones in your left or right ear to let you know that you're drifting left or right. So that's handy for takeoff. It's also handy for landing, if you want to make sure you're holding a heading as you're on descent. And we're going to demonstrate all this stuff, in future videos, but I just wanted to mention it, mention it for now. Yeah, so why don't we have a peek at some of the autopilot stuff.
All right. So, as we mentioned earlier, autopilot is TFM key left bracket, indicated by two tones. All right. So, what are we going to look at for autopilot?
Well, so there's various autopilot settings that we can get. We can get airspeed, which is left bracket A. No, sorry,
0 feet.
left bracket S. We can get altitude. We can get heading, and we can also set each of those things. So let's have a look, maybe at getting and setting the autopilot altitude.
Alright, so to do that, to see what the autopilot altitude is, do left bracket A.
AP altitude 0 feet.
It says AP altitude 0 feet. Now to set it, you would want to do a left bracket Shift A.
Enter altitude. Edit selected 0.
A dialog pops up. It says enter altitude selected 0. So let's put in
1. Selection removed. 5.
Whoops. Let's put in
5.
5.
0. 0. 0.
5,000 feet.
5,000.
All right.
A. Lockheed Martin registered prepar 3D.
Now, if you want to check to see if it worked, do right left bracket
AP altitude 5,000 feet.
A, and it says AP altitude 5,000 feet. All right, so we have our altitude, AP altitude set. So what would we do next?
So I should mention too, there's also a checkbox in that dialog. I'm not sure. I should clarify here that Andy and I are obviously not in the same location. We're talking over the internet. So, and I'm not hearing his sim.
Yeah.
So it's possible I might be missing a few things, but we can do. What I was going to talk about, Andy, is the hold.
No,
checkbox.
yes. Yeah. Okay.
So when you bring up that a lot of these autopilot dialogues, not everyone, because they don't all need it, but for example, altitude, when you do left bracket Shift A and you type in the altitude. If you tab through there, there's a checkbox that says hold this altitude. So basically, if your autopilot's turned on, and let's say you're at 5,000 feet, and you type in 10,000, and then you hit the checkbox and hit enter, it'll set that altitude, but it'll also turn on altitude hold, which will cause the airplane to actually change altitude and climb to that particular altitude or
Yeah,
descend,
and
whatever
hold
doing.
basically will level you out at whatever altitude you had put into it. So if we left bracket
Set
shift
autopilot
A,
altitude. Enter altitude. Edit selected 5,000.
let's change it to
1, 0, 0, 0, 0.
10,000.
10,000. Altitude lock checkbox not checked.
There's the altitude lock.
Space.
So
Checked.
let's lock it.
OK button.
Hit
Space.
the OK
Lockheed
button.
Martin registered. Prepar 3D register.
Now let's check to see what the value is with left bracket A.
AP altitude. Hold 10,000 feet.
It says AP altitude, hold 10,000 feet. So we got what we wanted out of that.
Okay. One of the things we should talk about, and we probably should have done this earlier, but that's all right. So TFM is one sort of important add-on in a set right now. Now this is going to change, but as of right now, you do need some other add-ons to sort of complete a full flight effectively, as in from takeoff to landing. We are working on adding flight planning and those sorts of features into TFM, so that will be coming, and obviously when it does, we're going to put out videos on it. But right now, most blind people that are flying are using one of two add-ons. One of them is called FS Tramp. It's FSTRAMP. That's the by far the most used autopilot add-on, and the other one is less used but still is used occasionally, is FSX Pilot, or I think that's actually been renamed now. So those add-ons allow you to sort of complete a flight from takeoff to landing, with TFM giving you all the audible information. But eventually we won't need those add-ons. We're working on sort of incorporating all that functionality.
Yeah,
and again, we'll have future videos on how to sort of integrate all that.
So if you see me or the two of us doing videos and we have different add-ons open, one of them is FS Tramp, so that is not part of TFM.
Yeah, it's a totally separate piece of software, and that one actually is not free, so it does require a license to use it. But like I said, eventually, hopefully before too much longer, that won't be required.
Alright, so let's see, back to the autopilot. Is there anything else we wanted to cover under autopilot?
We could talk about, so you can set the throttles. You'd want to be careful of that, because you make sure your parking brake's on.
So, yeah, that's a good way to demonstrate auto reading of airplane switches. So let's
Parking brake on.
turn on, there you go, turn on the parking brake. Let's turn it off.
Parking brake off.
Alright.
Parking brake on.
Turn it on, because that way we'll stay in one place when we set the throttles. Alright. So to set the throttles, I don't remember, is there a way? Yes, there's a way to check. I forgot.
Engine 1, 0.0%, 1642 pounds
Right
thrust.
bracket 1 and
Engine throttles are, I think it's control.
yeah,
I believe
it's right bracket
control
control 1 through yeah, right bracket control 1
4.
through 4 to check their statuses, and so we're at 0%. What is
be left bracket shift R or control R. So we've been doing this long enough that occasionally we forget our own hotkeys. We've put so much into this that
Set
Yeah.
throttle percent,
occasionally
mid 0,
we,
max 100, enter throttle,
Here it
edit
is.
selected 0.
Okay, it says set throttle. It says set throttle 0, minimum 0, maximum 100. So let's not do something too.
2, 0.
Let's go to 20.
OK button. Space. OK. Set throttle percent. Mid 0.
Let's go to the outside so you can hear it.
S. Lockheed Martin register. S.
Let's check our throttles to see where it's at.
Engine 1, 20.0%, 42.99
Okay, it's at
pounds thrust.
20% now.
Engine 2, 20.0%,
That's at 20%
42.93 pounds
now.
thrust.
Let's try
Enter throttle. Edit selection
giving it some more.
19.99511711875. 19.9. Land.
Let's
Selection
take
removed.
it to
5,
50.
0. Lockheed Martin registered 3.
Now listen to that.
A. A.
And
S.
to be clear, you don't actually need
S.
to set the throttles this way, but occasionally
S.
there are certain applications
A.
where it's useful to actually, set the throttles to a certain percentage. There are simulator keys to just adjust the throttle. You can use F1 to F4, so F1 cuts it all the way, 0, F4 is full, and then 2 and 3, F2 and F3 adjust it in increments. But this just gives you a way to, quickly, if you need 20 or 50% throttle, you can just type it in. And those are dialogues that TFM gives you.
1.
Alright, so we're back down to idle again. And we'll go back into the cockpit so it's quieter. Alright. I think we also had a fueling manager too, because people were talking about having an inaccessible way of being able to put fuel in the plane. So you can do that all inside of TFM with right bracket control F.
Tab control. Fuel tab selected.
There it is. So you have tabs for
Payload tab selected.
payload, and you have tabs for
Fuel
fuel.
tab selected. Lock fuel. Edit
Lock
tank.
fuel, you just put in however much you need, and TFM will figure out how much you need to put in each gas tanks.
Calculate button mode plus a.
And
Fuel tanks list. Center main.
you can also
Left main.
manually
Weight,
put them in
8399 LP.
yourself.
Center main.
There's the
Weight.
list of tanks here.
28,571 LP. Left main. Weight. 8399 LP. Right main. Weight. 8399 LP. Capacity. 8620. Right main.
It'll
Edit
tell
selected.
you how much is in it and what its capacity is.
Lockheed Martin registered 3.
Alright. So we covered, I think, quite a bit of the basics on the airplane gauges. Now, one thing we need to talk about. How in the world is this thing reading to us? Everything that we need to know. So it uses your current screen reader choice, NVDA for some, JAWS for others, SAPI 5. If you don't have a screen reader and all you need is that audible feedback, or for those who may use SAPI 5 or narrator for a screen reader, and it's automatic. You don't have to choose settings for what screen. I mean, you can choose in the settings what screen reader you want it to use. You don't have to. So for an example, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get
Runway 33R at CYYZ.
the current runway with the NVDA. Right bracket.
Runway 33R at CYYZ.
Yep. Right bracket Shift C.
Runway 33R at CYYZ.
Now I'm going to turn narrator off, or NVDA I mean, and we'll do it again. And we'll do it again. Then I'll let NVDA again.
Taskbar. Right bracket. C. Runway 33R at CYYZ. Lockheed Martin register.
And
Runway 33R at CYYZ.
it works regardless of what screen reader you're using. There's no settings you have to change in order to make it do that. It goes good a lot of times. Sometimes NVDA can run slow MP3D, so if for whatever reason speech bogs down or it crashes, you do not lose the connection to your airplane. Is there anything else we want to cover?
I think on this initial walkthrough, I think that's probably good. I mean, there's obviously a lot more to cover. We want to cover how to actually do a takeoff, how to set up a flight, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But we'll do that in future videos. This is more just an introduction to the system, and so people can get an idea of what it is and what it does.
Alright, pretty cool stuff. I started out with it when it was just a way to monitor some simple gauges and whatever the nearest city happens to be. And I came onto the project, I think it was back in March of
July, wasn't it?
July of last year I came onto the project because I had some ideas that I wanted to see TFM implement, and so instead of making two separate things that were accessible, we decided to pretty much put everything together under one roof, so everything is TFM. My ideas were like Flight Planner, something to replace FS Tramp, and I think there was a few other things. But since we have it all in TFM now, it has grown massively over the past 6 or 7 months. I think since August was our first joint venture
It feels
together.
longer than that, but
Yeah, no, it feels like a few years, but it feels like a couple of months in a sense too. It's like, whoa, we did all of that in that short amount of time. I think you would think it would be longer than that. But that's where,
Exactly.
but that's where I came from, and hopefully I will be around for a long time. So it's the two of us at TFM. I can say welcome to the world of TFM. And
again, if you want more information, it's talkingflightmonitor.com. There will be a link to this YouTube channel up there soon. It's not up there as of this minute right now, but we will put it up there. And so I would encourage people, if you like these videos, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, because we plan to upload many more. So
yes, press that subscribe button. And
right.
I think this will do it. And we will see everyone. Yeah, we will see everyone next time.
Talking Flight Monitor. Ops 26.1.